For 2 millennia, the motive of Judas Iscariot has been treated as a settled matter. He is the ultimate traitor, the man who sold out the Messiah for 30 pieces of silver. This narrative relies on a story of simple greed. But when we look at the first-century economy, we find a massive contradiction. 30 pieces of silver was the standard price for a common slave. In the context of the time, this was essentially petty cash. Judas was the treasurer for a movement that commanded the attention of thousands. He already managed significant resources. Risking his life and his position for a slave's wage defies basic financial logic. The records of the Roman occupation suggest a different identity for the man in the garden. Judas wasn't a petty accountant. He was a political operative acting inside a militarized war zone. First-century Judea was a province under total military occupation. This reconstruction of the Second Temple shows a massive fortified complex at the center of a city constantly monitored by Roman legions. Rome maintained order through a policy of immediate, overwhelming force. Any sign of a Jewish uprising was met with the instant slaughter of the participants. Execution by crucifixion was the empire's primary tool for psychological control. These crosses lined the roads to ensure every citizen understood the cost of resistance. This environment gave rise to the Sicarii, the dagger men. They were a network of radical assassins who used concealed blades to execute Roman sympathizers in crowded markets before vanishing back into the populace. The linguistic history of the name Iscariot links the subject directly to this specific group of insurgents. While often translated as man of Cariot, modern linguists identify the name as a Hellenized corruption of Sicariot. This places an armed radical within the inner circle of the disciples, driven by a mission of violent national liberation. To an insurgent like Judas, Jesus was the ultimate tactical asset. He was a leader who could mobilize the masses and command absolute loyalty, the perfect figurehead for a revolution. When Jesus claimed the title of Messiah, the Sicarii saw the spark they needed. In their worldview, the Messiah was a warrior king sent to physically shatter Roman rule. But a deep ideological friction emerged. Instead of calling for an uprising, Jesus preached pacifism, commanded his followers to pay Roman taxes, and urged them to love their enemies. The tension peaked during the entry into Jerusalem. Jesus arrived not on a war horse to seize the city, but on a donkey, descending these stone steps in a deliberate humility. Judas responded with a desperate tactical maneuver. He met secretly with the temple authorities in the shadows of the city to orchestrate an arrest. This move manufactured a crisis where Jesus would be forced to choose. If the Messiah were cornered by armed guards, the Sicarii logic dictated he would have no choice but to finally invoke his divine power, trigger a riot, and begin the war for liberation. The operation commenced in the Garden of Gethsemane. Judas approached with the expectation that the coming confrontation would be the catalyst for a miracle. He gave the signal, the kiss, and stepped back to watch the explosion of divine wrath he believed was inevitable. But the explosion never came. Jesus submitted to the guards. He let them tie his hands and lead him away without a single act of resistance. When Judas later threw the 30 pieces of silver back onto the temple floor, he was witnessing the total collapse of his grand strategy. The return of the coins wasn't the guilt of a petty thief. It was the psychological breakdown of a man who realized his attempt to force a holy war had only succeeded in delivering an innocent man to the gallows. Judas Iscariot was a political extremist who tried to weaponize the Messiah for a nationalistic revolution. He gambled his nation's future on a game of high-stakes chess, and when the king refused to move, Judas lost everything.